Do you live in the US and want an easy way to eat well and save money this year? Well, our discount might just be the one for you. HelloFresh is the US #1 meal kit service and delivers fast, fresh and affordable food to your door. So why have the cost of takeout or that horrible trip to the grocery store? Just get it delivered to you and have a hassle-free dinner of the highest quality.
So why not check out HelloFresh? Click the link down below for your special discount.
Well, it's time for the final full midweek fixture list of the 22-23 Championship season. We're back for matchday 43. There are 12 fixtures this midweek, and I'll be hoping to pick up a few more points than I did at the weekend. More on that in a moment. I hope you're looking forward to it. There's plenty of teams with something to play for at the top or bottom of the table. So we'll all be hoping that our teams pick up a result. I'll get to our score predictions in a moment, but before that, let's have a quick recap of what happened last weekend. I'm fresh back from a trip to Rotherham v Luton. I'll obviously reflect on that one because one of you picked up a perfect score for it. It definitely wasn't me though, because I didn't pick up any. 4 points for 4 correct outcomes. I started the match day pretty strong, albeit the score lines were a little bit more wild than we were expecting. And then the second half of the match day was just a disaster for me. All of the predictions a goal or two out. Just one of those frustrating ones. For you guys though, much better. You all managed to beat me. Tony, 5 perfect outcomes, 5 points for you, 1 ahead of me. W&G fan wins the match day with 10. One of his perfect scores was Luton Town winning 2-0 away at Rotherham. The other, Sunderland, winning 2-1 at home to Birmingham. And of course, Chris, you picked up 7 points as well. You did better than me too. You picked up a perfect score as well. And that was early in the match day for Blackpool versus Wigan. For now though, it is match day 43, 12 midweek fixtures across Tuesday and Wednesday, and we start with one that's potentially big at both ends of the table, because Blackpool face West Bromwich Albion, and the hosts just kept themselves in with a sniff of survival. A big win at home to Wigan, a pretty ugly 1-0 win under Stephen Dobbie, but quite frankly it did the job as Blackpool now within 4 points of safety with 4 games to go. For West Brom, stuttering everywhere, but they got that win against Stoke. It looked pretty poor early on in that game, 1-0 down at half-time, but Jason Malumbi, the hero, who turned it round for them. And because of that, they are now just 3 points off the playoffs, despite being in 11th place. They've got a game in hand to come as well. If they can get a win this midweek, they are right back in it, and arguably favourites for the playoff places. So really interesting to see how they get on after 4 games without a win. Sneaking that one at Stoke felt a big result. For Blackpool, after 4 straight defeats, similar at home to Wigan, it was a very early goal. It was a long time to hold on. And to be fair, there weren't many shots from either side. Wigan had 1 great chance but didn't take it. But they did have more corners, more shots. There was a bit of pressure on Blackpool. And they played a bit differently to how they did away at Luton. But they managed to get the result. And frankly, that is all that matters. Blackpool back-to-back home games. Will the crowd be bouncing after that 1-0 win? Will they believe? Will a few more tickets get sold? Oh, I just don't know. They've been decent at home this year. 24 points, not in the bottom 3 records. West Brom on the road, a very mixed bag. 9 defeats, 6 wins, 5 draws. But since they've been under Carlos Corberán, they've generally been a bit better. For them, it's just whether they take chances. I'm not sure if they do in this game. And I don't think the result I'm going to predict will help either side. I'm going to sit on the fence with a draw. I'm going to go for a big scoring one to start. 2 goals apiece. Well, next up is another very big game at both ends because it is Rotherham United versus Burnley. Burnley, we think, are going to be champions. It's just a matter of time. 12 points clear. It was delayed due to a 0-0 draw away at Reading. Not their finest performance, but again, that long unbeaten run continues. They were frustrated. They were held back a little. They had 1 very good chance, but otherwise, lots of the ball, lots of shots. No real great ones. They only had 1 shot on target in the entire game. In fact, Reading didn't have any, but Reading were there to frustrate them, and for large parts, you've got to be fair to them, they did. But Burnley, again, they're just waiting for the moment. They've still had a brilliant season. Back-to-back clean sheets if you want to take a positive from the game. For Rotherham, not too many positives. Another side that didn't have a shot on target at the weekend. They fell to a 2-0 defeat at home to Luton. I was there. And after watching the West Brom game a couple ago, I was a little worried about it as a Luton fan. But Rotherham just didn't turn up. It was a poor game from them. It wasn't helped massively by a pretty whistle-happy referee, giving a lot for 50-50s at both ends. But Rotherham didn't help themselves. Carlton Morris gifted the space of the penalty area on the stroke of half-time. And then the most bizarre handball at the start of the second half, a pretty danger-free cross into the back post. And for some reason, the defender handballed it. Not quite sure what he was thinking. But no goals in 3 of their last 4 games now, Rotherham. It is going to be a concern. And this task is going to be tricky. Are they going to try and set up cautiously and defensively to see out Burnley like Reading did? Are they going to play their normal game? If they do, Burnley will wipe the floor with them. I have no doubt in that. I'm going to go for a big one. I'm going for 3-0 to Burnley. Let's move on to the one other side who have got a tiny outside chance at the title. It is Sheffield United versus Bristol City. Sheffield United held up the party and strengthened their position in second with a big 4-1 win in the early kickoff. Frustrating first half for them. 1-1 at the break. They did fall behind, but it was one-way traffic after. And once they got going, they were brilliant. Again, it could have been very different depending on the early stages, but they've got threats in attacking areas from set pieces, from 25 yards with different midfield players. They've just got too much, and in the end, they will ultimately finish second, I feel. But Cardiff gave them a game for the first 45 at least. For Bristol City, back to the old ways, a 2-0 defeat against Watford. Harry Cornick followed up his first goal with an own goal against his former club's rivals. But either way, it wasn't a great Bristol City performance. On another day, they probably could have had a goal. They probably had the best chance of the game, in truth. And they had a lot of the ball, which was interesting, but they didn't make it count, so it doesn't really matter. Watford got the win. For this game, you have to predict on paper that it's going to be a home win. Bristol City struggling for form and players, definitely struggling to keep clean sheets again. 6 in a row where they've conceded now. And for Sheffield United, well, I know they lost at Burnley, but other than that, they've been pretty strong. They're pushing towards the finish line with strength. The only thing I'm worrying about here, Sheffield United play an FA Cup semi-final against City the following weekend. But I think they go for it against Bristol City. Promotion is everything financially and is the most important thing for their season. So I'm going for Sheffield United to nick it. Might be a little bit cagier than some think. I'm going to go by 2-1. Next, am I being harsh to say this is 2 teams with nothing to play for? It is Stoke City versus Wigan Athletic. Wigan dealt a hammer blow with defeat at Blackpool. 8 points from safety with 4 to go. That includes Cardiff having a game in hand. You've got to argue that it's a bit too far now, haven't you? Such a shame after starting the season well away from home. Looking decent under Richardson despite not many signings. But ultimately, it's been a disaster off the pitch. There's been some very poor decisions on it in terms of managerial personnel and whatever. And in the end, Wigan will end up back in League One. Stoke have got nothing to play for. They started well against West Brom. They faded away to defeat. 3 without a win following that 4-0 battering of Coventry. 2 good points before that as well. And now they're stumbling against mid-table sides. You do not know what to predict with Stoke City. They are the hardest in this league along with Bristol City. For Wigan, 3 defeats in a row, no goals. And since the last time the players weren't paid on time, it just looks like it's starting to fade. I know Sheffield United are a very good team in that 3-game run as well. But Blackpool and Swansea are hammer blows. This one much the same. Wigan, they started the season well away from home, but they haven't looked good there for a long time. They might frustrate Stoke to a point. It's the sort of game Stoke often slip up in, and they've got a bottom 3 home record this season. So in fact, do you know what? Although I initially thought Stoke might win this, I'm going to go for 1 apiece. The penultimate game on Tuesday night is again a pretty big one at both ends of the table. It is Sunderland who are back in playoff contention against Huddersfield fighting for their lives. Sunderland back-to-back wins by the odd goal, a 1-0 away at Cardiff backed up by a 2-1 at home to Birmingham. They held on with 10 men as well and managed to get the 3 points. It was an okay display. It was solid enough. I don't really know why we talk about performances at this stage of the season because frankly it doesn't matter. They got 3 points. They're without a lot of key attacking players from the first half of the year and they've won 2 games in a row. They're now just 2 points off the playoffs and back in the mix. For Huddersfield, a frustrating 1-0 defeat at Swansea. It leaves them just 1 point clear of the relegation zone. And it was a game that we pretty much expected, wasn't it? Swansea had nearly 80% of the ball. Both sides had one great chance, but Swansea probably edged the game on the whole. They had a lot more shots and shots on target and a lot more of the territory, but I think most people would have seen that coming. Ultimately, Huddersfield had a great chance and didn't take it, and that's why they lost by 1-0. So, not a huge surprise in the way the game panned out, and Huddersfield is going to be crucial to get results at home. But away to Sunderland, it could be one where they can frustrate the opposition. We've seen Sunderland struggle a bit at home this year. We saw that bonkers 4-4 last time against Hull. They don't win a huge amount of home games, Sunderland. 7-7-7 is their record this year. Goal difference of 0. Officially, they are the hardest team to predict at home. Huddersfield on the road had been awful, but they were brilliant at Watford. They were brilliant at Millwall, albeit Watford capitulated in their one. I really don't know with this. I think it's one of the hardest to predict of the week. I did have another Championship's favourite scoreline here. There's something about me that thinks Huddersfield might nick it, and if they do, it might be them almost safe. Do I stick with my original prediction? I'm going to regret it, aren't I? I'm going to go for Huddersfield to nick it. I'm going to go for frustration. 2-1 to Huddersfield away at the Stadium of Light. And if it's 1-1, I'm going to be a very upset man. On to the final game on Tuesday, which is Millwall versus Birmingham. On paper, you would say maybe a little bit of a home banker. Birmingham lost 10 of their 21 games on the road. They're not the worst side away from home by any means, but compared to Millwall's home record, you would have to expect a home win. The only thing that's putting me off here a little bit, if you go back to that Huddersfield game a few weeks ago at the Den, Huddersfield frustrated them. They sat deep and Millwall couldn't find a way through. And as long as Birmingham defend those set pieces well, they deal with the aerial bombardment, they've got a real opportunity. But do you predict over 90 minutes against Luton, against Huddersfield, and then against Birmingham, that they're going to be left spaced 25 yards out for one shot from distance to go in? It's a very bold prediction to say Birmingham nick it. Millwall did really well in a 2-0 win against Preston. Bradshaw and Fleming with the goals, two of those star players in this run towards the playoffs for Millwall. Whereas Birmingham, as we just mentioned, could not find a way through after blowing a 1-goal lead against Sunderland, but then against 10 men the last 10 minutes, just couldn't find a way through. Ultimately, over the 90, it was probably just about a fair result, but Birmingham definitely had their moments. And again, they've got to 50 points. They've done far more than most expected. They deserve massive credit. So after a 4-game unbeaten run, you can't really begrudge them a narrow defeat at a playoff chaser. Away to another playoff chaser and one who looked like they might make it this year. I'm going to go for Millwall to win, to strengthen their position, and to all but secure their playoff place. After 3 games without a goal, they scored 2 against Preston, but they don't concede many either. So let's go for a squeaky one. 1-0 to Millwall. Let's move on to Wednesday night, where Blackburn Rovers host Coventry City, and this game has become massive. It is 6th v 7th, there is 1 point separating them, and they have very different Saturdays, didn't they? Coventry went away to QPR and did what a lot of sides have done to QPR recently. They battered them. They went 1-0 up early through Gyökeres. They managed the game to an extent, but 2 more late goals, helping out that goal difference at this stage of the season. It is far superior to Blackburn's and it is level with Millwall. That could be crucial come the end of the year, but thoroughly deserved the win. Gyökeres, if they don't get in and go up this year, surely he's not going to be there next season. What a player he is at this level. For Blackburn, well, they could have done with someone like that. Frustration at home to Hull City, a 0-0 draw, lots of the ball, a terrible game. And you know what? Sky serves you right for picking 2 holes in a row. You knew that they weren't both going to be great, surely. But a few players just going off the boil there. It's not the right time to find a frustrating run. And it looks like Blackburn are doing what they always do. We thought maybe it would stop now Tony Mowbray's gone, but they've got to find a result very quickly. If they don't get a win at home in this game, they're going to drop out of the playoff places. And once you're out with 3 games to go, albeit they've got a game in hand, it is going to be a very tough one to get back in there. So for this game, I don't really know what to predict because Coventry have actually been a bit better than normal on the road this year. Blackburn at home have been very good. They don't draw many, as we know. And they have got the 2nd best defensive home record in the league this season too. Do you know what? I'm going to go. I've just got a feeling about it. I'm going for 1-0 to Coventry. We've seen that Coventry can collapse if they're in an early goal. We saw it against Stoke. We've seen it a couple of times in recent seasons. I think they nick it because Blackburn are out of form and they just don't really look like scoring a lot of the time. 1-0 Coventry, that's going to be a bad prediction. I can tell already. Well, I tell you what, if we're talking about tasty games that might lead to big changes in the table this midweek, this next one's pretty big on that front. It is QPR versus Norwich. Both sides heavily beaten at the weekend. QPR, another very sorry display, this time at home to Coventry. After that late fight back against West Bromwich Albion, it was back to normality, wasn't it? No goals, lots against, and just all over the place. For Norwich, a 5-1 defeat at Middlesbrough. It all looked so different on the 45-minute mark, didn't it? Because they just got that goal to get back into the game at 3-1. They'd already blown another by half-time. And Middlesbrough are back to their best in fairness. But for Norwich, a rude awakening. Still only 2 points off the playoff places. But as we mentioned before, what impact is goal difference going to make? Because theirs took a hit there. and it might be costly. They've got to try and get it back against a QPR side who are just all over the shop. They've been awful. They're the second worst team at home in the league this season. Norwich would actually be in the top 6 if it was based on away form only too. So that combination, I think, makes it easy. I'm going for a comfortable 2-0 Norwich win. Let's move on to one of the informed teams in the division who suddenly, when there's nothing to play for, are now one of the best sides and remarkably best defences in the league. It is Swansea City versus Preston North End. Preston's playoff chances dealt a hammer blow with that 2-0 defeat at Millwall. Didn't really do enough, and I don't want to criticise them too much because early in the season they didn't do a lot. They kept themselves in games, they got a lot of 0-0s, and it kept them in the mix. So it is the right strategy for them. This was one of those rare games. They had a lot of the ball. They did have more shots officially in the game, and he did have one great chance to get in it. But ultimately, they didn't do enough to win a game of football there. And Millwall's a tough place to go. This game probably easier on paper. For Swansea, 4 wins in 5, a 1-0 against Huddersfield. Had all the ball, had nearly all the chances, but still one moment a lapse of concentration at the back, and it almost cost them the win. For Swansea, 7 points off the playoffs, probably too far with 4 games to go, especially when a couple of those have got a game in hand. But they've played against a lot of poorer sides and they've beaten them. Their run of wins against Bristol City, Cardiff, Wigan and Huddersfield, when they play the top sides, like Millwall, like Coventry, they don't often win them. So I'm going to go for Preston to get something. We know they're one of the best away teams in the league. I'm going to go for Preston to nick it. There've been a few more goals in both of these teams' games recently. They've both been pretty good at the back until Preston this weekend. So I'm going to go for Preston to nick it. I'm going to go by 2-1. 3 to go, and it is remarkably another big game at both ends because Watford host Cardiff, and a win for Watford against Bristol City just kept them in it. They're 12th in the league, but still just 4 points off the playoffs, and they've got a better goal difference than a couple of them as well. Again, it wasn't a brilliant display, but it was better, and a clean sheet. My word, would that be welcome for Chris Wilder. Albeit Bristol City had a great chance to change that. They did their job, and they got a win. So, for Watford, after goals conceded galore, after lack of discipline in certain games, it will be a welcome sight to see a win. And it could remarkably end up in that top 6 still. For Cardiff, well, there's danger, isn't there? They are now level with Reading on 42 points after they got the point against Burnley. But Cardiff battered by Sheffield United second half. And after starting well, after competing for half a game, it is now 3 defeats in 4. Of course, they won the game against Blackpool. They are the games they've got to focus on. This one's going to be tricky. I wonder if they can frustrate Watford because we've seen them have problems before. But I do think the hosts win this one. I'm going to go for Watford to nick it by 2-1, but it's a very tough team to predict, isn't it? Let's get into the final 2, and it is the battle for 3rd and 4th at the minute. First up, 4th place Middlesbrough are home to Hull City. Hull with a good point away at Blackburn. 5 unbeaten now, albeit 4 of those draws. 4 very tense, poor games to watch for the neutral. And then that thriller against Sunderland in the middle. And for Borough, well and truly back to their best against Norwich. Their ruthless best. Wasn't actually a completely dominant display. Yes, they had the better chances, no doubt about that. But Norwich had their periods in the match. Middlesbrough, though, when they're at their best, they are ruthless in front of goal. And at home, they are exceptional. 42 goals scored at home. One of the best defensive records too. And Hull City don't score many if you take aside that Sunderland game. A pretty average record away from home, and they draw a lot of games rather than winning them. So I think we have to go for Borough here, and we have to go convincing. I don't think they'll get as many as they got against Norwich, but I'm going to go for them to win by 3-1. The final game of the day, well, that's huge as well. It is Reading versus Luton Town. Reading now level on points with Cardiff in 22nd place because of that draw against Burnley. Really decent effort defensively. They frustrated them, restricted them to not a huge amount, you have to say it. It was a good display from Noel Hunt's side after Paul Ince was let go. Not many of us predicted that, did we? For Luton, an efficient 2-0 win at Rotherham. Not the best performance in the world. It was a sluggish half an hour. Pretty awful game to watch at the start, if I'm being honest. But Carlton Morris given space, we know what he'll do. And gifted a penalty by just bizarre defending. We mentioned it in the Rotherham bit. It is another win though. It's 10 unbeaten for the Hatters. They're just about on the coattails of Sheffield United, 5 points off. They're going to have to put in one hell of an effort to overhaul them though. And that includes winning here. The big problem for Luton at the moment is injuries. For Reading, it's a lack of squad depth. They draw nearly every game at the minute. That's 4 in their last 5. Luton haven't lost in their last 10 as we mentioned. but they are missing key strikers. Not quite the same without Adebayo up front. Both Woodrow and Morris came up injured at the weekend, leaving a youngster and a centre midfielder up front. It just gives me a little bit of doubt, to be honest. So, as much as I don't want to, I am going to go for a Luton win. I know Reading have got a great home record, and I know that I don't like to predict Luton wins, but I'm going to go back for the special. They've got the best defensive away record in the league. They're only 1 point behind Burnley in overall record at the top of the away table. Luton 1-0. It's the most common away scoreline in the Championship. You have got to go for it. Luton Town to nick a win. Let's have a quick recap of what I've predicted then for matchday 43, and I've gone for all of the big hitters to get the result. The top 5, I've gone for victories in all of their games. I've also gone for 7th place Coventry to overhaul Blackburn with a win away there. That is a huge game in the race for the playoffs. At the bottom end of the table, well, I'm saying Wigan are done. I'm going for a big result for Huddersfield, which I may live to regret. And I'm also going for Cardiff to struggle at Watford. But if I get the other scores right as well, they will stay out of it on goal difference. But those are just my predictions for this midweek. The midweek ones are normally hard, aren't they? Let me know yours down in the comments below. I'm sure you'll all beat me again. If you did enjoy this one, please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe for regular content from the Honest Football Podcast. Of course, we will be back on Thursday for another big weekend edition. It's starting to shape up, isn't it? Who's going to make the playoffs? Who's going to get relegated? Let me know what you think down below. But thank you very much for watching as always. I do appreciate your support. And I'll see you back here on Thursday for more Championship predictions as the season end draws near.